The knife was halfway through the vanilla frosting when my sister's voice sliced the air, loud enough to freeze 20 parents in place. She didn't just call me rude for cutting the cake early. She announced I was selfish like our mother. That single sentence didn't just ruin a 7-year-old's birthday party. It detonated a quiet, ugly war over money and memory that I didn't realize we were fighting until the smoke finally cleared. The beige walls of the Briar Hollow Community Center were painted a color that could only be described as municipal indifference, but to me, they looked like sanctuary. I stood by the folding table, smoothing out a wrinkle in the plastic superhero tablecloth, and felt a rare, fragile sense of accomplishment. The room smelled faintly of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that grounded me. It was not the Ritz. It was not a sprawling backyard estate with a hired pony and a catering team in matching polos. It was a rented room for $50 an hour, and it was perfect because it was controllable. My son, Leo, was turning 7. 7 was a good age. It was the age where magic still existed, but reason was beginning to take hold. He was currently running in circles with 3 of his school friends, their laughter bouncing off the acoustic ceiling tiles. I watched him, my chest tightening with that specific ache of maternal love that feels dangerously close to fear. I just wanted today to be boring. I wanted pizza. I wanted the kids to hit a piñata until it broke. I wanted everyone to go home with a bag of cheap plastic toys and a sugar crash, leaving me with nothing but a trash bag full of wrapping paper and a quiet house. I had curated this afternoon specifically to avoid the kind of high-stakes theater my family usually specialized in. I had kept the guest list small, just family, a few neighbors, and Leo's best friends. No grand gestures, no speeches, and definitely no drama. I looked over at the cake table. The box from Marigold and Crumb Bakery sat there, pristine and white. That cake had cost me $85, a sum that made my stomach twist slightly when I tapped my card against the reader. But it was my line in the sand. I had paid for it myself. Every streamer, every pepperoni pizza, every juice box was paid for with money I earned, money that came from my own bank account. There were no strings attached to this party. No one could claim they made it happen, or so I thought. The double doors at the entrance swung open with a force that rattled the glass panes. The ambient noise of the party, the chatter of parents, the shrieks of children, seemed to dip for a fraction of a second. Tessa had arrived. My sister did not simply walk into rooms. She announced herself to the atmosphere. She was wearing a coat that looked significantly more expensive than anything else in the room, a shade of camel wool that screamed silent judgment against the community center's linoleum floor. She was 40 minutes late. "Lillian!" she called out, her voice pitching up into that theatrical register she reserved for public consumption. She swept across the room, bypassing the coat rack to drape her expensive wool over a folding chair, effectively claiming it. Oh, God. The traffic on Main was an absolute nightmare. I thought I would never get out of that intersection. She didn't hug me. She breezed past me, her eyes scanning the room not with warmth, but with the cold calculation of an appraiser. "Hi, Tessa," I said, keeping my voice level. "Glad you made it. Pizza is still warm if you want a slice." She waved a hand dismissively, her gold bracelets clinking together. "Oh, I ate before I came. You know how grease sits on my stomach." She stopped at the gift table, where I had neatly arranged the presents in a colorful stack. She reached out and adjusted a blue bag, turning it so the tissue paper fluffed out more dramatically. Then she moved a red box to the back. "Better," she murmured, loud enough for the mother of one of Leo's friends to hear. I swallowed the irritation rising in my throat. The table was fine. Tessa. "It was cluttered," she corrected, flashing me a tight, pitying smile. "You always group things too close together. It looks chaotic. I'm just helping the flow." She turned her attention to the streamers I had spent an hour taping up. "Are these the ones from the dollar store? The paper feels so thin." "They are streamers, Tessa," I said, stepping between her and the other parents. "They are destined for the garbage in 2 hours. They don't need to be Egyptian cotton." "I am just saying," she said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that carried further than a shout. I know things are tight for you right now, but you could have asked me. I would have picked up something a little more festive. This feels a bit grim, doesn't it? I felt the heat climb up my neck. I worked as a project manager at a marketing firm. I was not destitute. I was not struggling. I was simply a single mother who chose to live within her means rather than perform wealth I didn't have. But to Tessa, fiscal responsibility was just code for failure. The kids are happy, I said, my voice hard. Leo is happy. That is the metric. Tessa laughed. A light, tinkling sound that lacked any genuine humor. Of course he is. He doesn't know the difference yet. She drifted away before I could respond. Inserting herself into a conversation between two of my neighbors, I watched her go, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my gut. She was auditioning. That was what this was. She was playing the role of the benevolent, high-class aunt descending into the squalor of her sister's life to raise the standards. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. I walked back to the gift table to undo her rearranging, and my hand brushed against a small silver frame I had placed near the back. It was a photo of our mother, taken 5 years ago, 2 years before she died. She was laughing in the picture, holding a glass of wine, looking radiant and untouchable. I had put it there out of obligation. If I didn't include Mom, the older relatives would whisper. If I made her too prominent, I would feel sick. So, she sat on the gift table, a silent observer. Mom's legacy was complicated to the town of Briar Hollow. She was a saint. She was the woman who organized the charity drives, who baked casseroles for sick neighbors, who always looked impeccable at Sunday service. To Tessa and me, she was a minefield. She loved us, I think, but her love was a spotlight that could burn as easily as it could warm. She taught us that appearance was morality. She taught us that if something looked perfect, it was perfect. Tessa had absorbed that lesson into her marrow. I had spent my entire adult life trying to unlearn it. I turned away from the photo. I refused to let ghosts haunt a 7-year-old's birthday party. Mom? I looked down. Leo was tugging on the hem of my sweater. His paper crown was crooked, and he looked a little flushed. Hey, birthday boy, I said, crouching down to his level. Having fun? I'm hungry, he whispered, looking toward the white box. Can we have cake now? Tyler has to leave soon for soccer. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was a little earlier than I had planned for the cake, and I knew my Aunt Carol wasn't back from the restroom yet, but Leo's eyes were wide and pleading. The energy in the room was shifting. The kids were getting restless, bordering on rowdy. The sugar crash window was closing. You know what? I said, smoothing his hair. It is your birthday. We can do whatever we want. Let's cut the cake. I lifted the box and carried it to the center table. A ripple of excitement went through the room as the kids swarmed. I opened the lid, revealing the smooth vanilla buttercream with Happy 7th Birthday Leo, piped in bright blue script. It was simple, elegant, and exactly what he asked for. I started lighting the 7 candles. 1, 2, 3. Wait. Tessa's voice cut through the singing that was starting to bubble up. Lillian, stop. Aunt Carol isn't even in the room, and we haven't done the group photo yet. The match in my hand flickered. Leo is hungry, I said. Not looking at her, I lit the 4th candle. And Tyler has to leave. We are doing cake now. We can do photos after. But the lighting is better now, Tessa insisted, stepping up to the table and looming over the kids. Come on, let's move everyone to the backdrop. It will only take 5 minutes. You can't cut the cake yet. It ruins the aesthetic of the table spread if it is already sliced in the pictures. Tessa, I said, lighting the 5th and 6th candles. We are eating the cake. Please step back. You are being ridiculous, she huffed, crossing her arms. You are rushing it. Why do you always have to rush everything? I lit the 7th candle. The flame caught, bright and steady. Happy birthday to you, I started singing, my voice loud and clear, signaling to the room that the debate was over. The other parents joined in, their voices drowning out whatever Tessa was muttering. Leo beamed, the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. He blew out the candles in one big breath, sending a wisp of gray smoke into the air. "Make a wish," someone shouted. Leo closed his eyes tight, squeezed them shut for 3 seconds, and then opened them with a grin. "Okay, cake." I picked up the cake knife. It was a long, serrated silver knife I had brought from home. I didn't wait for a fanfare. I positioned the blade over a rosette of blue frosting and pressed down. "Unbelievable," Tessa said. She was standing right behind me, close enough that I could smell her expensive, cloying perfume. I ignored her. I sliced down, hitting the cardboard bottom of the cake, and began to lift the first slice. "You really couldn't wait 2 minutes?" she snapped. "I wanted a picture of the cake whole. I wanted to post it." "This isn't about your Instagram, Tessa," I said quietly, sliding the slice onto a paper plate. "It is a birthday party." "It is about respect," she hissed. "You invite people here, you take their gifts, and then you just bulldoze through the schedule because you can't be bothered to host properly. It is tacky, Lillian." I froze. The knife hovered over the second slice. The room had gone quiet. The singing had stopped, and the parents nearby were pretending to be very interested in their napkins. "Tessa," I said, keeping my voice low, turning to look at her. "Drop it." "No, I won't drop it," she said, and her voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a projection. "I am sick of this. You act like you are so noble with your little budget party and your store-bought streamers. But you are just dismissive. You don't care about anyone else's experience." "I am cutting a cake," I said, bewildered. "I am literally just serving cake to children." "You are doing what you want," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "Just like you always do. You don't care that Aunt Carol is missing it. You don't care that I wanted a photo. You just decide, and everyone has to follow." She took a step closer, her face twisting into something ugly and familiar. "You are selfish like your mom." She spat. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just a lull in conversation, it was a vacuum. The air left the room. "Selfish like your mom," it echoed off the linoleum. Several parents froze with pizza halfway to their mouths. My cousin David, who was holding a camera, lowered it slowly. I stood there, the cake server in my hand, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was such a specific, bizarre accusation. Our mother was the saint of Briar Hollow. Calling someone selfish like her didn't make sense to the general public, but to the people who knew, the older family friends, the cousins who remembered the closed-door arguments, the way Mom would freeze people out for days if they didn't compliment her cooking enough. It was a grenade. I saw Mrs. Gable, one of Mom's oldest friends, widen her eyes and look down at her shoes. She knew exactly what that phrase meant. It meant, you consume people, you take their love, and you give them performance in return. Tessa stood there, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with a mixture of triumph and sudden panic, as if she realized she had screamed a little too loud. "You always make it about yourself," Tessa added, her voice shaking slightly now, trying to justify the outburst. "Even today, it's always the Lillian show." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct I had screamed at me to fight back. I wanted to scream that I had paid for everything. I wanted to scream that she was the one making a scene at a 7-year-old's party. I wanted to throw the cake knife on the floor and tell her to get out. But then I looked at Leo. He was standing by my elbow, holding his paper plate. He looked from me to Tessa, his lower lip trembling. He didn't understand the history. He didn't understand the subtext. All he knew was that the adults were scary, and the party felt broken. If I yelled back, the party was over. If I yelled back, this became the memory he kept forever. The year Mom and Aunt Tessa screamed at each other over cake. I took a breath. I forced the air deep into my lungs, pushing down the rage, pushing down the humiliation. I locked it away in the same box where I kept everything else involving my family. I turned my back on Tessa. I knelt down in front of Leo. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt tight, like a mask that didn't fit, but it held. "Hey, buddy," I said, my voice steady, loud enough for the room to hear. "Do you want the piece with the big blue flower?" Leo blinked, tears hovering on his lashes. "Yeah," he whispered. "Coming right up," I said. I stood up, deliberately turning my shoulder so Tessa was blocked from his view. I looked at the line of silent, staring children. "Okay, who is next? Tyler? You need to get to soccer, right? Let's get you a giant slice." I started cutting. Slice, plate, fork, slice, plate, fork. I moved with mechanical precision. I did not look at my sister. I did not look at the parents who were exchanging horrified glances. I focused entirely on the topography of the cake. Behind me, I heard Tessa let out a sharp scoff, a sound of disbelief that I was ignoring her. "Unbelievable," she muttered again, but the air had gone out of her balloon, without my engagement. She was just a woman shouting at a birthday cake. She turned and marched away, her heels clicking angrily toward the exit. I didn't watch her leave. I handed a plate to Tyler. "Here you go, sweetie. Grab a napkin." I kept serving until every child had cake. I kept smiling until my face muscles ached. I saved the party, but as I watched Leo eat his frosting, oblivious to the fact that his aunt had just tried to assassinate his mother's character, I felt something cold settling in my chest. Restraint wasn't peace. It was just a different kind of war. The cleanup took an hour. The party wound down. The parents collected their children with extra gentleness, whispering "thank you" and "so sorry about" before trailing off. I waved them away, insisting it was fine, just family stuff. You know how sisters are. By the time I loaded the last bag of trash into the dumpster behind the community center, my hands were shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. I drove home in silence. Leo fell asleep in the back seat, clutching a new Lego set. When I carried him inside and tucked him into bed, he murmured, "Best cake ever, Mom." I kissed his forehead and turned off the lamp. "Best cake ever," I whispered. I went downstairs and collapsed onto the sofa. The house was quiet, but my phone was buzzing against the coffee table. I picked it up, a text from Aunt Carol. "Lillian, honey, just checking in. Are you okay?" That was intense. "Call me if you need to talk. Love you." I stared at the screen. Aunt Carol meant well, but "call me" was a trap. It meant, "tell me your side so I can gossip about it with the other cousins." I didn't have the energy for the deposition. I swiped the notification away. Another notification popped up. An email. From Marigold and Crumb Bakery. Subject, invoice query. Order 4,492. I frowned. The party was over. The cake was eaten. Why was the bakery emailing me at 8 in the evening on a Saturday? I opened it. "Dear Ms. Bryant, we are just following up on the call we received earlier today regarding the billing change for the sheet cake. We wanted to confirm that you still want the charge moved to the secondary card provided, and if you would like the invoice note updated to read, paid by family as requested. We didn't process the switch yet because the card number given had a digit error. Please advise." I sat up straight, the cushions groaning beneath me. I hadn't called the bakery. I had paid with my debit card 3 days ago. The transaction had already cleared. Someone had called them. Someone had tried to switch the payment to a different card, and they wanted the note "paid by family" added to the receipt. If that note had been added, and if the payment had been switched, the narrative would have changed. I wouldn't have been the mother who saved up and paid for her son's party. I would have been the charity case, the single mom who couldn't afford a cake, whose benevolent family had to step in and cover the cost quietly. Tessa, it was such a petty, small, vicious thing to do. It wasn't about the $85. It was about credit. It was about making sure that if anyone asked, she could produce a receipt that proved I was dependent on them. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but I didn't press it. I took a screenshot. Then, I saw the voicemail icon. One new message. I didn't remember my phone ringing. I must have missed it while I was driving Leo home. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. There was a burst of static, then the sound of a car engine humming. A turn signal clicked. Rhythmic. Steady. "No, I know," Tessa's voice said. She wasn't talking to me. She was on Bluetooth, talking to someone else, and she must have pocket-dialed me or failed to disconnect a previous call. "I know it was loud," Tessa said, her voice sounding tinny through the recording, but she needed to hear it. She walks around with that martyr face, acting like she is the only one who sacrifices. It is exhausting. A pause. The person on the other end said something muffled. "No," Tessa snapped. "I didn't tell her yet. I'm not going to tell her. Let her think she is the victim for a few more days. It makes it easier when we finally drop the hammer." My grip on the phone tightened. "I am just making sure everyone finally sees what she is," Tessa continued, her voice dipping into a lower, darker register. "By the time I am done, no one is going to believe a word she says about the money. Mom knew. Mom knew exactly what Lillian was. I am just finishing the conversation." The recording ended with a sharp click. I sat in the dark living room, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The money. Mom knew. Finishing the conversation. This wasn't about a birthday cake. This wasn't about me cutting a slice before the photo. Tessa hadn't exploded at the party because she was stressed. She had exploded because she was building a case. The scene at the community center, the call to the bakery, it was all part of a larger architecture I couldn't see yet. She was coming for me. She was coming for my reputation. And apparently, she was coming for something related to Mom and money. I looked at the sleeping face of my son in the frame on the mantel. I had swallowed the insult today to keep his peace. I had let her call me selfish. I had let her call me my mother's daughter. But I wasn't my mother. My mother kept secrets to keep the peace. My mother let resentment rot the floorboards until the house fell down. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I wasn't going to call Aunt Carol and cry. I wasn't going to text Tessa and scream. I was going to find out what she was talking about. I was going to find out why she tried to tamper with a bakery invoice. And what money she was referencing to her mystery confidant. Tessa wanted a war? She wanted to drag our mother's ghost into the sunlight? Fine. I took another sip of water, the cold liquid clarifying my thoughts. I wouldn't drag Leo into this, but I wouldn't let a smear campaign grow in the dark. Either, if Tessa wanted to talk about who was selfish and who was a liar, we could have that conversation, but we would have it on my terms, and I would bring receipts. The silence that followed the party was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm breaks, charged with static and unsaid things. In the Bryant family, silence was never an absence of activity. It was a strategy. It was how we punished one another without leaving bruises. For 3 days, my phone, which usually buzzed with the mundane chatter of the family group chat, photos of dinners, complaints about the weather, updates on various ailments, sat on my kitchen counter like a paperweight. The chat, titled Bryant Clan, was dormant. No one posted a single photo of Leo. No one said happy birthday in the chat, even though they had said it in person. It was as if the party had been erased from the official record. Then, the probing began. It started with a text from my cousin, Sarah. Sarah and I had grown up close, sharing clothes and secrets. But in recent years, she had drifted toward Tessa's orbit, drawn in by my sister's magnetic, chaotic gravity. "Hey Lil," the text read, "just thinking about you. Is everything okay over there?" I stared at the screen while I stirred oatmeal for Leo. It seemed innocent enough, but I knew the lexicon of my family. "Is everything okay?" was not a question. It was a prompt. "We are fine," I typed back. "Leo is enjoying his Legos. Why?" 3 bubbles appeared, danced for a long time, and then vanished, then appeared again. I just know single parenting is so hard. Sarah finally wrote, and with the economy being what it is, I was just worried. If you are struggling financially, you know you can tell us, right? No judgment. My hand tightened around the spoon. Struggling financially. I had a good job as a project manager. I owned my car. I paid my mortgage. I had just hosted a party I paid for in full. I am not struggling. Sarah, I replied, keeping my thumbs steady, we are doing great. Did Tessa say something? The response was immediate and evasive. No. God, no. She just mentioned she was worried about your stress levels. She said you seemed really on edge at the party. Manic. Almost manic. Tessa was painting a picture. She wasn't telling people I was mean. That would be too easy to disprove. She was telling them I was unstable. She was telling them I was broken, frantic, and destitute. She was weaponizing pity. I put the phone down and looked at Leo, who was happily eating his breakfast, oblivious to the fact that his mother was being diagnosed by a jury of her peers in a WhatsApp thread she wasn't part of. Later that morning, I met Becca for coffee. Becca was one of the few friends I had invited to the party who wasn't related to me by blood or marriage. She was a neutral party, a sanity check. We sat in a booth at the back of the diner, and she didn't waste time. She was working the room. Lillian, Becca said, wrapping her hands around her mug. I didn't want to say anything while the kids were there, but it was weird, really weird. What did she say? I asked. I needed to know the blast radius. Becca hesitated, biting her lip. She pulled Mike and Susan aside. You know, Leo's friend's parents? She was acting all hushed and confidential. She told them she was so concerned about Leo because you have a history of instability. I felt the blood drain from my face. A history? What history? She didn't say, Becca said. That was the genius of it. She just left it hanging there. She said, Lillian can get manipulative when she is off her baseline, and I just worry she isolates Leo. Then she did this sigh, like she was carrying the weight of the world, and said, I just hope she doesn't crash again. I stared at the table. I have never crashed. Becca, I have never had a breakdown. I have been the one holding the broom every time Tessa shatters something. I know, Becca said fiercely. I told Mike that. I said, Lillian is the most together person I know, but the seed is planted. Lil, she is making people look for cracks in you. Every time you forget an appointment or look tired, they are going to think, oh, Tessa was right. It was a suffocation strategy. If I got angry, I was unstable. If I defended myself, I was defensive. If I said nothing, I was admitting guilt. Thank you for telling me, I said, my voice sounding hollow. What are you going to do? Becca asked. I don't know, I said. But she isn't doing this for fun. Tessa doesn't exert this much energy unless she wants something. 2 days later, the war moved from the social sphere to the institutional one. I took Leo to Harborview Pediatrics for his annual physical. It was a routine appointment, scheduled months in advance. We checked in, and I sat in the waiting room reading a magazine while Leo played with the bead maze. The receptionist, a kind, gray-haired woman named Mrs. Higgins, who had known Leo since he was an infant, waved me over to the desk. She looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Bryant, she said, leaning over the counter and lowering her voice. I wanted to let you know. We had a phone call yesterday regarding Leo's records. I froze. What? A woman called, Mrs. Higgins said, glancing at her computer screen. She said she was his aunt. She wanted to know if we had documented any behavioral concerns or any signs of home stress. She said she was helping you manage his care. The air in the waiting room seemed to drop 10 degrees. What did you tell her? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I told her absolutely nothing, Mrs. Higgins said firmly. I told her that unless she is a legal guardian or listed on the HIPAA release form, which she is not, we cannot discuss a patient. She got quite pushy. She said it was a family emergency and that she needed to know if you were bringing him to his appointments. It was Tessa, I said. It wasn't a question. She didn't leave a name, Mrs. Higgins said, but she called from a local number. I just thought you should know. It felt fishing, like she was looking for ammunition. I walked back to my seat, my legs feeling like lead. This was not just gossip anymore. This was surveillance. Tessa was trying to build a dossier. She was trying to find evidence that I was a negligent mother. Why? What was the endgame? You don't try to prove your sister is unfit just because she cut a birthday cake early. You do it because you want to take something from her. That night, after Leo was asleep, I sat in my kitchen with Mark. Mark was my ex-husband's best friend, which sounded messy, but he had stayed in my life as a sort of platonic anchor after the divorce. He was Leo's godfather, and he was the only man I trusted to tell me the truth without sugarcoating it. "You need to call her," Mark said, pacing my kitchen floor with a beer in his hand. "You need to call her and tell her to back the hell off. This is stalking. Lil, calling his doctor? That is crossing a line." "If I call her, she wins," I said, rubbing my temples. "She wants a fight. She wants me to scream at her so she can record it and play it for Aunt Carol and say, 'See? Listen to how crazy Lillian is. I am not giving her the soundbite.'" "So you are just going to let her audit your life?" Mark asked, slamming his beer down on a coaster. "No," I said. "I am going to audit hers." "What does that mean?" "It means I am done reacting," I said. "Tessa is sloppy. She is emotional. She leaves traces. If she is trying to frame me for something, she is going to make mistakes. I am going to document everything, every text, every voicemail, every weird phone call." "Documenting doesn't stop her," Mark said. "No," I agreed, "but it protects me when she inevitably goes too far." I started the next morning. My first call was to Marigold and Crumb Bakery. I needed to know exactly what had happened with that invoice. I spoke to the manager, a woman named Chloe who sounded harassed but sympathetic. "Yes, Ms. Bryant," Chloe said, the clicking of a keyboard audible in the background. "I have the note here. A woman called the afternoon of the party. She said she was your sister. She gave us a credit card number. It was a Visa ending in 4492, and asked us to refund your card and charge hers instead. She specifically asked us to reprint the receipt with the note, 'Paid by family, gift,' on the bottom." "And why didn't it go through?" I asked, writing down the last 4 digits of the card. "The card was declined," Chloe said. "Insufficient funds." I almost laughed. Of course, Tessa wanted the credit for saving the day, but she didn't actually have the money to pay for it. It was the perfect metaphor for our relationship. She wanted the glory of the rescue without the cost of the sacrifice. "Thank you, Chloe," I said. "Please do not authorize any changes to that invoice. I paid for it." "It stays that way." "Understood," she said. I hung up and stared at the paper where I had written the numbers. 4492. That was Tessa's old card. I recognized it because I had bailed it out twice before. Then, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from my bank. Briar Hollow Savings. Security alert. Suspicious activity detected. My heart hammered. I logged into the app. There was a flagged application. Someone had tried to open a store rewards credit line at a home goods chain using my social security number and email address. The application had been flagged because the address listed wasn't my current home. It was the address of the house we grew up in, the house Mom sold 10 years ago. The applicant had used my maiden name. It was clumsy. It was stupid. It was Tessa. She wasn't just trying to ruin my reputation. She was trying to inhabit my financial identity. Or maybe she just wanted to see if she could. Maybe she was testing the locks on my life to see which ones were open. I printed the fraud alert. I put it in a folder. The folder was thin, but it was growing. I needed context. I needed to understand why now. Why 2 years after our mother died? Was Tessa suddenly going nuclear? I called Nora. Nora was my mother's best friend. They had been inseparable since high school. Nora knew where the bodies were buried because she had usually helped hold the shovel. We met at a cafe downtown. Nora looked tired. She was wearing a raincoat that looked too big for her, and her hands shook slightly as she lifted her tea. "I heard about the party," Nora said, not making eye contact. "Carol told me Tessa made a scene." "She did more than that." "Nora," I said, She is telling people I am unstable. She is trying to access Leo's medical records. She tried to open a credit card in my name. Nora flinched. She put the cup down. Oh, Tessa, she whispered. She just never learns. Why did she call me selfish like Mom? I asked. That is the part I don't get. Mom gave everything to everyone. Why would Tessa use that as an insult? Nora looked at me then, her eyes sad and watery. Lillian, she said softly, you have a very curated memory of your mother. We all do. We had to. What does that mean? Your mother loved you both, Nora said. But she was afraid of Tessa. She was afraid of Tessa's temper. She was afraid of her fragility. So she managed her. Managed her how? Nora took a deep breath. For the last 5 years of her life, your mother was paying Tessa's rent. She paid for her car. She paid off 3 different credit cards. She called it fresh start money. Every time Tessa messed up, your mother wrote a check to make it go away. I sat back, stunned. Mom told me she was broke. She told me she couldn't afford to help me with the down payment on my house because her pension was tight. She wasn't broke, Nora said. She was drained. By Tessa, but she made me swear never to tell you. She said, Lillian is strong. Lillian can survive on her own. If Lillian knows I'm giving money to Tessa, she will hate me, and she will hate her sister. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The narrative I had lived with, that I was the independent one, the one Mom was proud of, was true, but it was incomplete. I was the one Mom ignored because I didn't need saving. I was selfish because I kept my own money. Tessa was the victim who required constant infusion of cash, and now Mom was gone. The bank of Mom was closed. Tessa is broke, isn't she? I asked. Nora nodded. She has been burning through whatever she had. She called me last week asking for a loan. She said you were holding out on her. Holding out on her? I asked. I don't have anything of hers. She thinks you do, Nora said. She thinks there is more money. She thinks your mother left something behind that you are hiding. There was no money, I said. The estate was empty. We sold the house to pay the medical bills. There was nothing left. Are you sure? Nora asked. The question hung in the air. What do you mean? I asked. Your mother was secretive, Nora said. She hid money from Tessa so Tessa wouldn't spend it. Maybe she hid it too well. I left the cafe with my mind racing. If Mom hid money, where would it be? I went straight to the storage unit I rented on the edge of town. It was filled with the debris of my mother's life, boxes we hadn't had the heart to throw away, furniture that didn't fit in our houses. I rolled up the metal door. The air smelled of dust and old cedar. I found the banker's boxes labeled Mom, Office. I sat on the concrete floor and started digging. I went through old tax returns, utility bills from 1999, recipes cut out of magazines, and then I found it. It wasn't a bank book. It was a gap. My mother was meticulously organized. She had folders for everything: house, car, medical, insurance, but in the accordion file for the year she died, the tab labeled Financial was thin. Too thin. I pulled out the papers, a few bank statements from her main checking account, showing a low balance, but tucked inside a mislabeled envelope, an envelope marked Recipes, I found a letter. It was on letterhead from the Briar Hollow Credit Union. Dear Mrs. Bryant, thank you for updating your payable on death (POD) beneficiary designation for account ending in 8831. We have processed the change as requested. The letter was dated 3 months before she died. I stared at it. Account 8831. I had been the executor, or rather, I had handled the paperwork because Tessa couldn't handle the stress. We had closed Mom's main account at First National. I didn't know about an account at Briar Hollow Credit Union. If there was a POD beneficiary, that money wouldn't go through probate. It would go directly to the person named. If Mom named me, Tessa would never know unless she saw the mail. If Mom named Tessa, then Tessa would have the money. But Tessa was broke. Tessa was desperate, which meant either the money was gone, Or Tessa didn't know about it either. Or Tessa knew, and she couldn't get to it. I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of the letter. Then I texted Tessa, "We need to talk. Not about the cake, about the credit union." I watched the 3 dots appear almost instantly. She was glued to her phone. "I don't want to fight," she replied. The tone was suddenly soft, almost victimized. "I just want you to reflect on your behavior." I didn't reply. A second text came through. "You always cut first. Lil, you always have. You cut the cake. You cut me out. You cut Mom out when she didn't do what you wanted. You are a cutter." I read the words again. "You always cut first." She wasn't talking about the birthday cake. She was talking about resources. She felt that by being independent, by not needing Mom, I had severed the bond. She felt that by having my own life, I had rejected the family pathology. And now, she was trying to force me back in. She was trying to break me so I would need her, or so I would pay her to go away. "It is about inheritance," I whispered to the empty storage unit. "It is about being chosen." Tessa believed she was the chosen one because Mom paid her bills. Now that the bills weren't being paid, she needed a new villain. She needed me to be the thief so she could be the martyr. I stood up, dusting off my pants. I put the letter in my purse. I wasn't going to reply to her text. I wasn't going to play her game of emotional tennis. I was going to a professional. I drove home and opened my laptop. I searched for a state attorney's Briar Hollow. I found a name, Mara Klein. Klein and Hartwell Legal Services. I drafted an email. "Dear Ms. Klein, I need a consultation regarding the estate of my late mother. I believe there may be undisclosed assets and potential identity fraud involving a family member. I have documents." I hit send. My hands were steady. Tessa had called me selfish. She had called me my mother's daughter. She was right about one thing. I was my mother's daughter. But she forgot which version of our mother I took after. I didn't take the part that hid and enabled. I took the part that kept the receipts. I closed the laptop. The house was quiet. Leo was at his dad's for the weekend. I looked at the fraud alert again. I looked at the picture of the credit union letter. Tessa had started a fire at a birthday party, hoping the smoke would cover her tracks. She didn't realize that the wind had shifted. The smoke was blowing back in her face, and I was just beginning to see what she was trying to hide. The office of Klein and Hartwell Legal Services was located on the second floor of a brick building that smelled of old paper and lemon furniture polish. It was the kind of smell that signaled order, a sharp contrast to the chaotic frequency my life had been vibrating on since the birthday party. I sat in a leather chair that was slightly too large for me, clutching a manila folder in my lap as if it contained nuclear codes rather than a few printed screenshots and a wrinkled letter from a credit union. Mara Klein was not what I expected. I had anticipated someone older, perhaps a bit dusty like the building, but Mara was sharp, 30-something, and wore a blazer that looked like it could cut glass. She didn't offer me tea or sympathy. She offered me a notepad and a pen. "Start from the beginning," she said. "Facts only. Leave the feelings for the end." I told her everything. I told her about the cake. I told her about the accusation. I told her about the text messages, the call to the pediatrician, the attempt to open a credit card in my name, and the bakery invoice tampering. Finally, I slid the letter from the Briar Hollow Credit Union across the desk. Mara picked it up, her eyes scanning the text behind rectangular glasses. She didn't frown. She didn't gasp. She simply nodded, a micro-movement that terrified me more than any dramatic reaction could have. "This is a payable on death acknowledgement," she said, her voice dry. "It means your mother designated a specific beneficiary for this account. Do you know who the beneficiary is?" "No," I said. "My sister, Tessa, told me there were no other accounts. She told me Mom died with nothing but the house, which we sold to pay the medical debts. She handled the paperwork." Mara set the letter down and laced her fingers together. When a person dies with a small estate, especially if there is no real property left to transfer, the process can be handled informally. It is called voluntary administration in some places, or a small estate affidavit. It relies heavily on the honesty of the person filing it. Tessa filed it, I said. Then we need to see what she told the court. Mara said, if she filed an affidavit stating there were no other assets, and she knew about this account, that is fraud. If she withdrew money from this account without being the named beneficiary, that is theft. And if she is trying to open credit cards in your name, that is identity theft. She leaned forward. Ms. Bryant, you are not in a family spat. You are in a crime scene. My advice to you is to stop talking to your sister immediately. Do not call her. Do not text her asking for explanations. Do not engage in emotional debates about who was mom's favorite. From this moment on, you communicate in writing only, no threats, no essays, just facts. I can't just cut her off, I said, the old reflex of family loyalty twitching in my chest. She is my sister. She is a liability, Mara corrected. We are going to pull the probate docket. We are going to request a full inventory of the estate, and we are going to send a formal letter asking for clarification on these financial anomalies. If she is innocent, she will provide the records. If she is not, she will escalate. Escalate how? I asked. Mara looked at me with a pity that was almost clinical. People who build their lives on lies do not like it when you turn on the lights. Get ready. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. It was a mundane bureaucratic errand, standing in line behind people clutching speeding tickets and marriage license applications. When it was my turn, I requested the file for the estate of Eleanor Bryant. The clerk handed me a thin file. It was disappointingly light. I took it to a wooden table in the corner and opened it. There it was, the voluntary administration statement. Applicant, Tessa Bryant. Relationship to decedent. Daughter. Total value of personal property, $4,000. List of assets. Personal effects. Clothing. Household goods. There was no mention of a credit union account, no mention of any savings. Tessa had signed her name at the bottom. A flourishing signature that looked jagged and rushed. Beneath it was the standard clause. I declare under penalty of perjury that the information provided is true and correct. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. $4,000. Mom had worked for 30 years as a school secretary. She wasn't rich, but she wasn't destitute. She had a pension. She had small savings. Tessa had told me the money was gone, eaten up by the nursing home copays and the funeral. I had believed her because I was grieving, and because I didn't want to talk about money while we were picking out a casket. I had let Tessa be the gatekeeper because I thought I was being kind. I thought I was letting her feel useful. I took a picture of the document with my phone. Then I drove to the Briar Hollow Credit Union. It was a small branch on the edge of town, the kind with free lollipops and tellers who knew your name. I walked up to the desk and asked to speak to a manager, a man named Mr. Henderson came out. He wore a short-sleeved dress shirt and looked nervous. I am Lillian Bryant, I said. My mother, Eleanor Bryant, passed away 2 years ago. I have reason to believe she held an account here, and I need to see the records. Mr. Henderson tapped on his keyboard, his brow furrowing. Ah, yes, Eleanor Bryant. I see the account here. It is closed. Closed? I asked. When was it closed? I cannot give you those details. Ms. Bryant, he said, turning the screen away from me. You are not listed as an owner on the account. I am her daughter, I said. I am an heir. The account had a specific beneficiary structure, he said, his voice dropping to a practiced, apologetic tone. And the estate matters were handled by the executor. We have already released the relevant information to the authorized party. To Tessa Bryant? I asked. He pursed his lips. I cannot confirm names, but we followed the instructions provided by the individual with the death certificate and the administration papers. Mr. Henderson, I said, leaning in. If that account had a payable on death beneficiary, the money should have gone directly to that person. It shouldn't have been part of the estate administration. Did it go to the beneficiary? Ms. Bryant, please, he said, looking around the lobby. If you have a dispute regarding the estate, that is a civil matter. I cannot help you." He was stonewalling me. But his nervousness gave it away. Something about the way this account was closed wasn't clean. Tessa had used her position as the authorized party to control the narrative. She had told the bank one thing and the court another. To the court, she said there was no money. To the bank, she likely presented herself as the person in charge of moving the money. She had created a scarcity myth. Mom had nothing. She was always scrambling. If there was no money, no one asked questions. If no one asked questions, no one saw the statements. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, feeling a headache blooming behind my eyes. Tessa wasn't just messy, she was calculating. She had relied on my grief making me blind, and for 2 years, it had worked. 2 days later, the invitation came. It was from my Uncle Jerry. Jerry was Mom's younger brother, a man who disliked conflict so much he would likely apologize to a burglar for not having better silver. "Lillian," he said over the phone, his voice breathless. "We are having a family dinner on Sunday. Pot roast, just the family. Me, Aunt Carol, you, and Tessa. We need to clear the air." "I don't think that is a good idea." "Uncle Jerry," I said, cradling the phone against my shoulder as I folded laundry. "Please," he said. "It is tearing the family apart. People are taking sides. We just want everyone in the same room. Tessa says she is ready to apologize if you are. If you are." The implication was subtle but sharp. We were both at fault. We both had things to apologize for. "I haven't done anything. Uncle Jerry," I said. "Just come," he pleaded. "For your mom. She wouldn't want this." That was the trump card. For Mom. I agreed. I knew it was a mistake. But I needed to see the battlefield. I needed to see what Tessa was telling them. I left Leo with his father. I didn't want him anywhere near the pot roast diplomacy. When I arrived at Uncle Jerry's house, Tessa's car was already in the driveway. It was freshly washed. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary and tension. Aunt Carol was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping carrots. Uncle Jerry was pouring wine with a heavy hand. Tessa sat in the living room on the floral armchair. She looked diminished. She was wearing a pale blue sweater and no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, humble bun. She looked like a penitent child. "Hi, Lillian," she said softly when I walked in. She didn't stand up. "Hello, Tessa," I said. Keeping my distance, I sat on the sofa opposite her. "Wine?" Uncle Jerry asked, thrusting a glass into my hand. "Thanks," I said. We moved to the dining room. The clinking of silverware on china sounded like gunfire. For 10 minutes, we talked about the weather. We talked about the local road construction. We talked about Aunt Carol's garden. Then, Uncle Jerry cleared his throat. "So," he began, looking at his peas, "we wanted to get you girls together because, well, life is too short. Your mother loved you both so much." "I know," Tessa said, wiping the corner of her eye with a napkin. "I miss her every day. That is why the party was so hard. It just felt like we were losing the traditions she built. She was doing it. She was rewriting the party. It wasn't about her insulting me. It was about her grief over lost traditions." "I understand that, Tessa," Aunt Carol said soothingly. "But you can't scream at your sister in front of the kids." "I know," Tessa said, her voice trembling. "I was just so overwhelmed. It felt like Lillian was trying to erase Mom, the way she rushed the cake. It was just so efficient, so cold. It reminded me of how Mom used to worry." I stopped chewing. "Mom used to worry about what?" Tessa looked down at her plate. "She just worried." "No," I said, my voice steady. "Say it. What did she worry about?" Uncle Jerry intervened. "Now, Lillian, don't get agitated." "I am not agitated," I said. "I am curious. What did Mom worry about?" Uncle Jerry sighed. He looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "She mentioned it a few times. Lil, in the last year or so, she said she worried about your selfish streak. She felt like you were pulling away from the family, focusing on your career. She was afraid you wouldn't be there for Tessa when she was gone. The room went silent. Selfish streak. It was the exact phrase Tessa had used at the party. Selfish like your mom. Now it was Mom worried about your selfish streak. The Ouroboros of lies was completing its circle. I looked at Uncle Jerry. He was a good man. He wouldn't lie, which meant he believed this. When did she say that to you, Uncle Jerry? I asked. Did she say those exact words? Selfish streak? Well, Jerry hesitated. I mean, Tessa told me that Mom said it when Mom was sick. Tessa was the one there every day, you know? She heard things we didn't. I looked at Tessa. She was studying her wine glass, her face a mask of tragic composure. So Mom didn't say it to you, I said to Jerry. Tessa told you Mom said it. It was during the hospice weeks, Tessa said quietly, not looking up. She was lucid. She was crying. She said, Lillian is so hard. She is so selfish with her time. Who will look after you? I felt a cold clarity wash over me. Mom hadn't said that. Mom had spent her final weeks holding my hand, telling me she was proud of me for being independent, telling me she wished she had been braver. Tessa was ventriloquizing the dead. She was using our mother's ghost to validate her own jealousy. Who told you she said that? I asked again, looking around the table. Did anyone else hear Mom say I was selfish? Aunt Carol? Aunt Carol looked uncomfortable. She never said it to me, honey, but, well, Tessa was there the most at the end. Because I was working, I said. To pay the mortgage on the house where Mom was dying, to pay for the hospice nurses so Tessa didn't have to do the heavy lifting. See, Tessa whispered, you always bring it back to money. You think money equals love. That is exactly what Mom meant. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I am not doing this, I said. I am not going to sit here and let you rewrite history using quotes from a woman who can't defend herself. Lillian, sit down, Uncle Jerry said. We are just talking. No, I said. You aren't talking. You are being fed a script. I looked at Tessa. You are lying. Tessa, you are lying about Mom. You are lying about the money, and I know about the credit union. Tessa's head snapped up. For a second, the tragic mask slipped. Her eyes went wide, sharp, and terrified. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked its usual smooth vibrato. It was thin. I think you do, I said. And I think that is why you are so desperate to make me look like the bad guy. Because if I am the bad guy, no one looks at what you did. I threw my napkin on the table. Thanks for the pot roast. Aunt Carol. I walked out. I heard Uncle Jerry calling my name. But I didn't stop. I got in my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard, I couldn't get the key in the ignition for a full 10 seconds. She had poisoned them. She had spent 2 years dripping poison into their ears. Telling them Mom was afraid of me. Telling them I was cold and selfish. And they believed her. Because she was the one who cried. Because she was the one who needed help. In my family, neediness was mistaken for intimacy. Independence was seen as rejection. My phone buzzed as I pulled out of the driveway. It was a screenshot from my cousin Sarah. Just saw this. Thought you should know. It was an Instagram story from Tessa. Posted 5 minutes ago. It was a black screen with white text. Breaking cycles is the hardest thing you will ever do. Standing up to narcissists who use money to control you is terrifying. But I am doing it. I am protecting my family's memory from people who only care about themselves. Healing toxic family survivor. I scrolled through the replies that Sarah had captured. So proud of you. Babe, you are so strong. Cut them off. You deserve peace. Narcissists never change. Protect your energy. People who had never met me. People who didn't know I paid for the cake. Didn't know I paid for the funeral. Didn't know I bought Leo his shoes. They were all cheering for my destruction. I drove home in silence. I felt stripped. I felt raw. but I also felt resolved. Tessa wanted a war of words. She wanted to fight with hashtags and whispers. Fine, I would fight with subpoenas. The next day, I sat in Mara Klein's office again. I gave the go-ahead. "Send the letter," I said. Mara nodded. She drafted it while I watched. It was beautiful in its lack of emotion. "Dear Ms. Bryant, we represent Lillian Bryant regarding the estate of Eleanor Bryant. It has come to our attention that there may be discrepancies regarding the inventory of assets filed with the probate court, specifically concerning accounts held at Briar Hollow Credit Union. We formally request a full accounting of all assets held by the decedent at the time of death, as well as records of all disbursements made by you as the voluntary administrator. Furthermore, we have received notification of unauthorized attempts to access credit lines using our client's personal information. We are currently working with financial institutions to trace the origin of these applications. If these attempts continue, we will be forced to refer the matter to the proper authorities for criminal investigation. Please direct all future correspondence to this office. Sincerely, Mara Klein, Esquire." It was a warning shot. It said, "We know about the bank. We know about the credit card fraud. Stop. We sent it via certified mail and email." I waited. The response didn't come from a lawyer. It came from Tessa. And it came at 2 a.m. My email notification pinged in the dark. I rolled over and grabbed my phone, squinting against the blue light. Subject: "You are unbelievable." I opened it. It was a wall of text. No paragraph breaks. Just a stream of consciousness poured out in rage. "I cannot believe you got a lawyer. You are so petty. You always have to win, don't you? You were always Mom's favorite, even if you pretend you weren't. She always looked at you like you were perfect and looked at me like I was a project. You think you are better than me because you have a job and a house, but you have no heart. Lillian, you are cold. That is why your husband left. That is why Mom was scared of you. And now you are trying to sue me over nothing?" I read through the bile, my heart pounding. It was the same old song, jealousy, victimhood. But then, at the very bottom, she slipped. "You think you deserve that money? You didn't even know it existed. Mom saved that $3,000 in account 8831 for US, for the family. And I used it to pay for her headstone and the flowers you didn't bother to help with. It was mine to manage. You are just greedy." I froze. Account 8831. She had typed the number in the probate filing. She had sworn there were no other accounts. She had sworn the estate was empty. But here, in black and white, she admitted she knew about account 8831. She admitted she accessed it. She admitted she spent it. And she claimed she used it for the headstone. I knew that was a lie. I paid for the headstone. I had the receipt in my desk drawer. I paid Everbrook Memorial Services $4,000 from my own checking account. Tessa had taken the money from the credit union, money that likely had a beneficiary attached, and she had pocketed it. And now she was claiming she used it for expenses that I had already covered. She was double-dipping. She was stealing from Mom, stealing from me, and lying to the court. I sat up in bed, the room cold around me. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore. This wasn't just about sibling rivalry or grief. Tessa was scared. Her rage, her late-night emails, her public posts about narcissists. It was all a smokescreen. She wasn't fighting for her reputation. She was fighting to stay out of jail. She had falsified the past. She had erased assets. And she had built a narrative where I was the villain so that if I ever found out, no one would believe me. Grief plus jealousy plus money. I took a screenshot of the email. I forwarded it to Mara. Then I laid back down. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and realized that the sister I grew up with, the one I shared a room with, the one I used to protect on the playground, was gone. She had been replaced by someone who would burn me to the ground to keep warm, and I had to stop her. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth was the only thing left that belonged to me. The probate inventory was a single staple-bound stack of papers that cost me $20 to print at the county clerk's office. I sat in my car in the parking lot, the engine idling to keep the heat running, and flipped through the pages, It was a mundane list of a life reduced to line items. Dining room set, $300, 1999. Toyota Camry, $2,000. Miscellaneous household goods, $500. I ran my finger down the columns. It was all there, and yet it was all wrong. The miscellaneous household goods category was a catch-all that swallowed everything my mother had loved. Her collection of first edition poetry books, miscellaneous. The antique sewing machine she had restored by hand, miscellaneous. The silver tea service that had been her grandmother's. I paused. I remembered that tea service. It was heavy, tarnished sterling silver, kept in a velvet-lined box in the buffet. I had looked for it when we were clearing out the house, but Tessa had told me she had already dealt with it. I assumed she meant she had packed it. Now, looking at this inventory, I realized dealt with it likely meant sold it. But the glaring omission was the bank section. Financial accounts. First National Checking 4421. Balance at death, $400. That was it. Just the one checking account. There was no mention of the Briar Hollow Credit Union. There was no mention of account 8831. Tessa had signed this document. She had sworn to a judge that this was the complete picture of our mother's solvency. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just lying to me. This was perjury. It was a felony. Tessa, who panicked if she got a parking ticket, had walked into a court of law and lied on a government document. Desperation had made her bold. I drove straight to Nora's house. I needed to understand the timeline. I needed to know why that money existed in the first place. Nora opened the door wearing a gardening apron. Though it was 40 degrees outside, she looked at my face and sighed. "Come in, Lillian," she said. "I figured you would be back." We sat in her sunroom. I put the inventory on the table. "Where did the money in the credit union come from, Nora?" I asked. Tessa admits in an email that there was $3,000, but my lawyer thinks there might have been more originally. Nora looked out the window at her dormant hydrangeas. She twisted her wedding ring. "Your mother sold the land," Nora said quietly. I blinked. "What land?" "The house was on a 1/4 acre. "Not the house lot," Nora said. "The strip of land up in New Hampshire. The one your father bought in the 80s. You probably don't even remember it. It was just scrub pine and rock, but a developer wanted it for an access road 3 years ago." "She sold it?" I asked. "For how much?" $12,000, Nora said. My jaw tightened. $12,000? To my mother. That was a fortune. That was security. "What happened to it?" I asked. Nora turned to face me. "She wanted to keep it for Leo. She told me, 'This is for Lillian's boy, for college, or for a car when he is 16. She put it in the credit union so it wouldn't get mixed up with her bill money." "And then?" I pressed. "And then Tessa got in trouble," Nora said. "Again." "What kind of trouble?" "A private debt," Nora said, her voice lowering. "Gambling isn't the right word, but speculative. Tessa got involved with some online trading thing. She borrowed money from a payday lender to cover a margin call. The interest rates were eating her alive. They were calling her job. They were threatening to garnish her wages." I closed my eyes. I could see it perfectly. Tessa, panicked, hysterical, calling Mom in the middle of the night. "She came to your mother," Nora continued. "She said she was going to lose everything. She said she was going to be homeless. So, your mother took $8,000 out of the credit union account. She paid off Tessa's debt." "She used Leo's money," I said, the bitterness coating my tongue like ash. "She didn't see it that way," Nora said gently. "She saw it as saving her daughter. She told me, 'I still have $4,000 left. I will build it back up for Leo. I just need Tessa to be safe first.' She called it a fresh start." "Mom always called it a fresh start," I said. "But Tessa never started fresh. She just dug a new hole." "Your mother loved you both," Nora said. "But she knew you could swim. She spent her whole life keeping Tessa from drowning." I stood up. The inventory document lay on the table between us. The $4,000 that was left, I said. That is what was in the account when she died. The money Tessa stole. Yes, Nora whispered. It wasn't just money, I said. It was the last piece of Mom's hope for my son. I left Nora's house with a cold clarity. Tessa hadn't just taken cash. She had taken the remnants of a safety net that Mom had tried, desperately, to weave for Leo. And then she had the audacity to call me selfish at his birthday party. Mara Klein did not gasp when I told her about the land sale. She simply added it to her notes. This is good, Mara said, tapping her pen against the desk. Not morally good, obviously, but legally useful. We have a clear paper trail of an asset, the land sale, that flowed into an undisclosed account. This gives us probable cause to petition the court. For what? I asked. A supplemental accounting, Mara said. We file a motion stating that new information has come to light, suggesting the inventory was incomplete. We ask the judge to compel the administrator, Tessa, to produce bank statements for the 3 years prior to death. Will she have to go to jail? I asked. The question felt childish, but I needed to know the stakes. Unlikely for a first offense on a small estate, Mara said, but she will be removed as administrator. She will be forced to repay the misappropriated funds, and she will have a fraud finding on her record. It is not dramatic courtroom TV. Lillian, it is paperwork. It is deadlines. It is a slow, grinding pressure that makes it very hard to hide. Do it, I said. The motion was filed on a Tuesday. Tessa's retaliation arrived on a Thursday. I was at my desk at Cedar and Vale Creative, reviewing copy for a landscaping client, when the director of human resources, a woman named Janice, who usually only spoke to me about health insurance open enrollment, appeared in my doorway. Lillian, she said. She didn't smile. Do you have a moment? We need to chat in my office. My stomach dropped. I followed her down the hall, passing the open plan desks where my colleagues were typing and laughing. Janice closed her door. She gestured for me to sit. We received a call this morning, Janice said, folding her hands on her desk. From a woman claiming to be a potential client. She didn't give a company name, but she asked specifically for your employment status. My employment status? I asked. She asked if we were aware of the ethical complaints pending against you, Janice said. She claimed that you were involved in a financial dispute involving elder abuse and that she felt our firm should know before we let you handle sensitive budgets. The room spun. Elder abuse. Janice, I said, my voice shaking. That was my sister. Janice's expression softened slightly, but she remained professional. I assumed it was personal. Lillian, the caller ID was blocked, but the tone was emotional. She didn't sound like a client. However, she made some very specific allegations about you mishandling funds. It is a probate dispute, I said, fighting the urge to cry. My sister is upset because I'm requesting an audit of my mother's estate. I have never mishandled a cent in my life. You know my track record here. I manage the biggest accounts in the firm. I know, Janice said. And frankly, the call didn't stick. We aren't opening an investigation. But Lillian, this is the workplace. We can't have people calling the main line making accusations like that. It reflects poorly on the firm. I know, I said. I am so sorry. It won't happen again. You need to handle it, Janice said. Whatever this is, keep it outside these walls. I walked back to my desk, my face burning with humiliation. I felt naked. My colleagues were looking at their screens, but I felt like they could see the scarlet letter burning on my chest. Tessa had crossed the final line. She had come for my livelihood. She didn't care if I lost my job. In fact, she probably wanted me to lose it. If I lost my job, I would be struggling. If I was struggling, I would be just like her. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked scared. But I didn't look like a victim. I texted Mark. She called my job. She told HR I was an elder abuser. Mark called me immediately. I went out to the parking lot to answer. "I am coming over," he said. "I am going to drive to her house and I'm going to—" "You are not going to do anything," I said. "That is what she wants. She wants a reaction. She wants me to scream. She wants you to threaten her so she can call the police and say we are harassing her." "Lillian, she is trying to get you fired," Mark said. "This isn't a game." "I know," I said, "but I'm not fighting for revenge. Mark, I am fighting for reality. She wants to turn this into a mud fight. I am keeping it in the ledger." "You are a machine," Mark said, but he sounded worried. "I am not a machine," I said. "I am a mother, and I have to go pick up Leo." That evening, I doubled down on the one thing I could control: my home. When I picked Leo up from school, I turned off my phone. We made tacos. We built a complex fortress out of sofa cushions. I read him 3 chapters of a book about a mouse on a motorcycle. I did not mention Aunt Tessa. I did not mention the lawyer. I did not mention the fact that I had spent 20 minutes crying in my car before I picked him up. "Mom, you are squeezing me too hard." Leo laughed when I hugged him goodnight. "Sorry," I said, loosening my grip. "I just really like you." "I like you too," he said. "You are the best taco maker." I stood in the hallway after he fell asleep, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. This was the reality I was fighting for, a reality where he was safe, where he was loved, and where he didn't have to carry the baggage of his grandmother's choices or his aunt's failures. The breakthrough arrived 3 days later. On a Saturday, the mailman, a cheerful guy named Dave, handed me a stack of envelopes. Most of it was junk mail. But one envelope stood out. It was thick, brown, and wrinkled, as if it had been wet and dried out. The return address was from Mrs. Gable, my mother's neighbor, the one who had looked down at her shoes when Tessa insulted me at the party. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note from Mrs. Gable and a smaller, sealed white envelope. "Dear Lillian, I hope you can forgive me for not giving this to you sooner. We were renovating the kitchen and found this slipped behind the built-in china cabinet. Your mother must have hidden it there when she came over for tea that last month. She told me she was leaving something just in case. But her memory was so bad at the end. I thought she was confused. I found it yesterday. I haven't opened it. I looked at the white envelope. It was addressed to Lillian, in my mother's handwriting. The handwriting was shaky, the loops of the L trembling, but it was hers. I sat down on the front porch steps. My hands were shaking. I tore it open. It wasn't a sentimental letter. It was a photocopy of a document and a handwritten note on a piece of lined notebook paper. The document was notarized. It was a letter of instruction addressed to the Briar Hollow Credit Union, dated 6 months before she died. To whom it may concern, please ensure that upon my death, the balance of account 8831 is transferred solely to my grandson, Leo Bryant, with my daughter Lillian Bryant as custodian. This money is not to be part of my general estate. And then, the note, Lillian. I am writing this at Mary Gable's house because I don't want to leave it at home where it might get lost. I know things are going to be hard when I'm gone. I know Tessa is going to be angry. She thinks I have more to give, but I have given her everything I can. This account is the last thing I have. It is for Leo. Please, Lillian, if Tessa is handling things, verify everything. Do not take her word for it. She convinces herself of things that aren't true. I love you both, but I trust you to do the math. Love, Mom. I let the paper fall into my lap. I trust you to do the math. It was a vindication, but it was also a knife in the heart. Mom knew. She knew Tessa would steal it. She knew Tessa would lie. She knew it so clearly that she snuck a letter to her neighbor's house to hide it behind a china cabinet. She had lived in fear of her own daughter. She had loved Tessa, paid for Tessa, saved Tessa, but she hadn't trusted Tessa. And she had left me with the burden of enforcement. She had left me the clue, but she hadn't had the courage to tell me to my face. She avoided the conflict in life and bequeathed it to me in death. I felt the grief mutate. It wasn't the soft, sad grief of loss anymore. It was hard. It was sharp. It was resolve. Tessa had called me selfish for cutting a cake. She had called me selfish for not crying enough, but Mom had called me the one who could do the math. I took a picture of the letter. I emailed it to Mara Klein. We have the smoking gun. I wrote, that night, at 11:30. My phone rang. It was Tessa. I hesitated. Mara had said no communication, but I knew this ring. This wasn't an angry ring. This was the fallout ring. She had received the notice of the supplemental accounting petition. She knew the walls were closing in. I answered. I put it on speaker and set it on the counter. I hit the record button on my iPad nearby. Lillian? Her voice was wet, thick with tears. She sounded small. She sounded like the little sister who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I am here, Tessa, I said calmly. I can't take this, she sobbed. I can't take the pressure. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you trying to destroy me? I am not trying to destroy you, I said. I am asking for the records. That is all. It is not just records, she wailed. You know what this looks like. You are making me look like a criminal. I am your sister. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, I said. It means I expect you to tell me the truth. I am not suing you, I said. I am petitioning the probate court. If you provide the accounting, it ends. If you return the money that belongs to Leo, it ends. I don't have the money, she screamed. It is gone. I spent it on bills. I spent it on living. Do you want me to starve? I want you to take responsibility, I said. I am not going to be manipulated. Tessa, not anymore. You are cold, she hissed. You are ice cold. You are exactly what Mom said you were. Mom told me to verify everything, I said. I found the letter. Tessa, from Mrs. Gable. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. She wrote you a letter? Tessa whispered. Yes, I said. She left instructions. She knew you would take the money. She didn't know anything, Tessa spat, but her voice wavered. She was scared. She realized the ghost was talking back. I am ending this call, I said. I suggest you contact a therapist if you are struggling. And if you want to settle this, have your lawyer call mine. We can hire a mediator, but I am not doing this over the phone in the middle of the night. If you do this, Tessa said, her voice low and venomous, you will lose the family. Uncle Jerry won't forgive you. Aunt Carol won't forgive you. You will be alone. I have Leo, I said. And I have the truth. That is enough. I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I had done it. I had heard the threat, and I hadn't folded. I had broken the cycle. The court scheduled the hearing for 3 weeks out. In the days that followed, the prophecy Tessa made began to come true. The family fractured. Uncle Jerry called me and told me I was being vindictive. He said that dragging my sister into court over a few $1,000s was petty. He didn't understand that it wasn't about the money. It was about the fraud. He didn't want to understand. It was easier to see me as the villain than to accept that his niece was a thief. Aunt Carol sent me a card that simply said, "Praying for your heart to soften." I put the card in the trash. I realized that I might lose them. I might lose the Christmas dinners and the awkward barbecues. I might become the pariah of the Bryant clan. But as I watched Leo playing in the backyard, digging in the dirt with a plastic shovel, I knew I had made the right choice. If I let Tessa win, I was teaching Leo that love means letting people steal from you. I was teaching him that family means complicity. I wasn't going to do that. I decided then that I wouldn't go on a public smear campaign. I wouldn't post screenshots of Tessa's texts on Facebook. I wouldn't tell the other mothers at school what she had done. I would tell the truth once, in the courtroom, cleanly, without cruelty. I would present the inventory. I would present the bank records. I would present Mom's letter. I would let the facts be the weapon. I went back to the box of papers. I organized them into binders. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. Tessa was trying to sell a story where I was the selfish, unfeeling monster. She was posting vague quotes about toxic siblings and garnering sympathy from strangers. Let her have the likes. I would have the judgment. I was done being the sister who cut the cake early. I was now the sister who brought the receipts. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care if they called me selfish. I was simply accurate. The week before the hearing felt less like a countdown and more like a slow suffocation. The air in Briar Hollow had turned crisp, the leaves turning the color of bruised plums, but inside my head, it was strictly high noon in a desert. I was parched for truth, and yet every time I tried to take a sip, I got a mouthful of sand. Tessa, realizing that her Lillian is unstable narrative had failed to stop the legal machinery, pivoted to a new story. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, designed specifically to trigger the scarcity mindset that plagued our family. She didn't tell people I was crazy anymore. She told them I was greedy. Lillian is going after the estate, she told Uncle Jerry, who repeated it to my cousin Sarah, who repeated it to me in a hushed, terrified phone call. She is trying to claw back money that was meant for everyone. She is trying to take the funeral money. She is trying to bill the family for the time she spent with Mom. It was a lie so audacious it took my breath away. There was no money meant for everyone. There was a specific account, left to a specific child, which Tessa had liquidated, but the brilliance of Tessa's lie was that it deputized the rest of the family. If I was taking from the estate, I was theoretically taking from them, even though there was nothing left to inherit. She made them feel robbed by proxy. You know how Lillian is, Aunt Carol told my mother's friend Nora, who reported it back to me. She has her big job and her nice car, but she still counts every penny. It is just sad she can't let Tessa have a little breathing room. Tessa was the one who was there at the end. After all, that phrase, the one who was there at the end, was the shield Tessa used to deflect every arrow of logic. It didn't matter that I paid the mortgage. It didn't matter that I paid the hospice copays. Tessa had been physically present in the living room, sitting in the armchair, and therefore she owned the moral high ground. And apparently, she felt that moral high ground came with a cash prize. I sat in Mara Klein's office on a rainy Tuesday, the gray light filtering through the blinds painting stripes across the mahogany desk. Mara looked more serious than usual. She had a file open in front of her, and her fingers were resting on a document with a heavy, deliberate weight. "We got the response from the subpoena to the credit union," Mara said. She didn't look at her notes. She looked at me. "Lillian, this is going to be hard to hear. I already know she took the money." "Mara," I said, "I found the letter from Mom." "It is not just that she took it," Mara said. "It is how she took it. We assumed she just transferred it using her power of attorney before your mother died. Or maybe she just withdrew it as cash. But she didn't." Mara slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a photocopy of a form titled Beneficiary Designation Update Request. "The account had a payable on death designation," Mara explained. "As you suspected, your mother had listed your son, Leo, as the beneficiary. That means the moment your mother died, that money belonged to Leo. It bypasses probate entirely. The executor has no right to touch it. It is not part of the estate." I nodded. "Okay, so she stole it." "She couldn't just steal it," Mara corrected, "because the bank wouldn't release it to her. The bank would only release it to the beneficiary or the beneficiary's guardian. So, for Tessa to get that money, the beneficiary had to change." I looked down at the form. It was dated 3 days after my mother died. "She tried to change the beneficiary after Mom was dead?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. "No," Mara said. "Look at the date on the signature line." I looked. The signature, a shaky scrawl that looked somewhat like my mother's, was backdated. It was dated 2 weeks before she died. "But look at the processing stamp," Mara pointed out. "The bank received this request 3 days after the death. It was mailed, and look at the identification provided." I squinted at the photocopy of the driver's license attached to the form. It was my mother's license. But it was the old one, the one that had expired a year before she died. We had gotten her a new state ID when she stopped driving. Tessa submitted a change of beneficiary form, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like a stone. She forged Mom's signature, backdated it, and mailed it in after Mom was already in the morgue. She changed the beneficiary from Leo to herself. And the bank flagged it, Mara said. See here? The internal notes. Signature discrepancy. ID expired. They rejected the change. They rejected it? I asked. But then how did she get the money? The account is empty. Because she came back, Mara said. She went into the branch in person. She presented the voluntary administration paperwork, the court documents where she swore there were no other assets, and she convinced a teller that the account was part of the small estate. She likely claimed the beneficiary designation was a mistake or an old error. She bullied her way through compliance. We are still deposing the branch manager to find out exactly what was said, but the result is clear. She used a fraudulent court filing to override a bank designation she failed to change with a forged signature. I sat back in the chair. This wasn't just messy family stuff. This was federal bank fraud. This was forgery. She really thought she deserved it, I whispered. She convinced herself that Mom meant to leave it to her, so fixing the paperwork was just correcting a clerical error. That is what she will say, Mara agreed. But the law calls it theft. Mara reached into the file again. And there is more. We looked into the expenses she claimed. You know she said she used the money for the funeral? Yes, I said. She said she paid for the headstone. I cross-referenced the invoice she submitted to the probate court against the records from Everbrook Memorial Services. Mara said. She laid 2 pieces of paper side by side. The first was the invoice Tessa had filed with the court. It was on Everbrook letterhead. It listed a casket, a vault, a headstone, and administrative fees. The total was $8,000. The second was the actual invoice from Everbrook, which Mara had obtained directly. The total was $4,000. She photoshopped it, I said. It looks like she used a scanner and some whiteout, Mara said. She added line items, administrative fees, expedited service. These don't exist. She padded the bill by $4,000, exactly the amount she took from the credit union, so that if anyone asked where the money went, she could show a receipt that balanced the ledger. I felt sick. It was so calculated. It was so much work. She had spent hours cutting and pasting, calculating and forging, just to steal from her 7-year-old nephew. She made herself the hero, I said. She told everyone she paid for the funeral. She used stolen money to pay half of it, and then she forged a receipt to make it look like she paid double, just so she could keep the change. Lillian, Mara said gently, I need to ask you something. Has she threatened you? She called me late at night, I said. She said she was falling apart. She said she might do something stupid. That is manipulation, Mara said. But I mean physical threats or harassment. She called my HR department, I said. She tried to get me fired. I think we should consider a protective order, Mara said. When she sees this evidence, and she will see it, because we have to disclose it to her attorney before the hearing, she is going to feel cornered. People who commit this level of fraud do not react well to exposure. She might come to your house. She might go to Leo's school. A protective order? I asked. The words tasted metallic. Like restraining order? Against my sister? Against the person who forged your mother's signature and tried to destroy your career, Mara said. I looked at the window. I tried to picture it. Police officers serving Tessa papers. Tessa being arrested if she drove down my street. It was the right thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. But I couldn't say yes. Not yet. I can't, I said. Not unless she does something physical. I can't be the one who criminalizes her. I just want the money back for Leo. I want the truth on the record. I don't want her in handcuffs. Lillian, Mara warned. She has already criminalized herself. You are just the witness. Let's wait for the hearing, I said. I need to give her one chance to fix it. Mara sighed. Okay, but be careful. The cornered animal is a cliché for a reason. I left the office and drove to Nora's house. I needed to wash the taste of the invoices out of my mouth. I needed to remember that we were a family, not just a racketeering operation. Nora was waiting for me. She had a cardboard box on her kitchen table. "I found it," she said as I walked in. "I knew I kept it." It was an old iPhone, my mother's phone, the one she had used for the last 3 years of her life. "I thought this was lost," I said, picking it up. It was heavy, encased in a thick, ugly rubber case that Mom had insisted on because she dropped things. "Tessa gave it to me after the funeral," Nora said. "She said she didn't want to look at it. She told me to wipe it and donate it, but I couldn't. It felt like erasing Eleanor." She plugged it into a charger. The screen lit up. We waited in silence while the Apple logo glowed. "Why are you giving this to me now, Nora?" I asked. "Because I have been a coward," Nora said. She sat down, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I stayed quiet. "Lillian, when Tessa started saying those things about you being selfish, about Mom worrying about you, I knew it was a lie, but I didn't say anything." "Why?" I asked. "Because I was afraid Tessa would cut me off," Nora admitted. "She is the gatekeeper to the memories. She has the photo albums. She has the urn. I felt like if I crossed her, I would lose Eleanor all over again. It was weak of me." "It wasn't weak," I said. "Tessa is terrifying." "No," Nora said firmly. "She is a bully, and I am done being bullied." The phone chimed. It was on. Nora tapped the green message icon. "Read the thread with me," she said. I scrolled back. It was a conversation from 3 years ago. "Mom, Tessa called again. She is asking for rent money. I told her no." Nora, "Good for you." "Elle, you have to hold the line." "Mom, it is so hard. She cries and says Lillian doesn't help her. She says Lillian has so much and she has nothing. It breaks my heart when she talks like that." Nora, "Lillian works hard. Elle, Tessa needs to understand that." Mom, "I know. Lillian is my rock. I don't tell her enough." "Do I? I am so afraid that if I praise Lillian too much, Tessa will crumble. It is like a seesaw. I have to keep Tessa up, so I have to push Lillian down, but I hate it. I hate that I can't just be proud of my daughter without the other one feeling attacked." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I kept propping Tessa up by quietly dimming you. It was the Rosetta Stone of my childhood, my mother's coolness, her distance. It wasn't a rejection of me. It was a strategy to manage Tessa." I scrolled further. "Mom, I am going to sell the land in New Hampshire. I am going to pay off Tessa's debt one last time. But the rest is for Leo. I need to make sure Tessa doesn't get it. She will find a way to justify taking it. She always does. She blames Lillian for her choices, and she thinks the world owes her a refund." Nora, "Make sure you lock it up tight." Elle, Mom, "I will. I just wish they could be sisters, real sisters." "But Tessa can't forgive Lillian for being okay." "Tessa can't forgive Lillian for being okay," I read aloud. "That is it," Nora said. "That is the whole war. You are okay. You survived. You built a life. And every time she looks at you, she sees what she could have been if she hadn't spent 20 years waiting for someone else to fix her." "Thank you, Nora," I said, clutching the phone. This changes everything." "It doesn't change what she did," Nora said. "But maybe it changes how much it hurts." The night before the hearing. The protective order Mara suggested suddenly seemed like a very good idea. It was 9 o'clock. I had just put Leo to bed. The house was dark, save for the porch light I always left on. I was in the kitchen, organizing the exhibits for court. The forged invoice, the beneficiary form, the text messages. When I heard a car door slam, I looked out the window. Tessa's car was in my driveway. She had parked crookedly, one tire on the grass. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked the lock on the back door. I checked the front door. Then, the doorbell rang. Long, insistent. I didn't open it. I walked to the window next to the door and pulled back the curtain. Tessa was standing there. She looked wrecked. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy knot. She was wearing a trench coat over sweatpants. Her eyes were red-rimmed and frantic. "Lillian!" she yelled, pounding on the glass. "I know you are in there. Open the door." I took a deep breath. I picked up my phone. I didn't dial 911. I hit record. "Go away, Tessa," I said through the glass. "We have court tomorrow. We shouldn't be talking." "I am not going to court," she screamed. "I am not going to let you drag me in there and humiliate me in front of a judge. You have to stop this. Lillian, you have to drop it." "I can't drop it," I said. "You took Leo's money." "It wasn't Leo's money," she shouted, her voice cracking. "It was family money. Mom wanted me to have it. She knew I needed it." "Mom left a letter." "Tessa," I said. "She left a letter saying specifically that it was for Leo, and you forged her signature to take it." Tessa froze. She stopped pounding. She pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging it up. "You think you are so perfect," she hissed. "With your little house and your perfect son and your invoices. You think you can just audit my life? You don't know what it was like. Lillian, you weren't there. You were off playing career woman while I was wiping her chin. I earned that money. I earned it." "You don't earn an inheritance by suffering," I said calmly. "And you certainly don't earn it by forgery. It is all about the cake, isn't it?" she sneered, switching tactics wildly. "You are still mad that I called you selfish. You are so petty. Lillian, you are willing to destroy the family because I embarrassed you at a birthday party." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was vibrating with rage, but underneath it, there was a terrifying hollowness. She had nothing left. No money, no truth, no allies who knew the real story. All she had was this one grievance, this one moment where she felt she had caught me being imperfect. I unlocked the door. I left the chain on, opening it 3 inches. "Tessa," I said. She blinked, surprised by the opening. "Drop the lawsuit," she demanded, but her voice wavered. "If cake is what you are clinging to," I said quietly, "you are admitting you have nothing else." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. She stammered. It isn't about the cake. It is about respect." "No," I said. "It is about the fact that you have spent 20 years waiting for Mom to save you, and now that she is gone, you are trying to make me pay the bill." Tessa looked down at her shoes. Her shoulders slumped, the rage evaporated, leaving behind a naked, shivering fear. "I only changed one thing," she whispered. I watched her. "What?" "The beneficiary form," she mumbled, talking to the porch steps. "I only changed the date. I knew she meant to sign it. She just forgot. I was just helping her finish it. I deserved it. Lillian, after everything I did for her, I deserved a little help." There it was, the confession. She admitted she changed the date. She admitted she felt entitled to it. She framed it as help, as a correction, but she admitted the act. "And the invoice?" I asked. "The funeral invoice from Everbrook? Did you deserve to pad that by $4,000 too?" Tessa's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide with panic. She didn't know I had the real invoice. That was an administrative fee," she stammered. "For my time, for the gas money. You don't understand how much gas I used driving back and forth to the hospital." "Tessa," I said, my voice soft. "Stop." She stopped. She looked at me through the crack in the door, tears streaming down her face. "I can't go to jail. Lil," she whispered. "Please, I can't." I looked at my sister, the sister I had shared a bunk bed with, the sister who had taught me how to braid hair. She was a criminal. She was a liar. She was toxic, but she was also terrified. "Then fix it," I said. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "How?" "Return what was taken," I said. "Agree to the full accounting. Sign a document admitting that the inventory was incorrect. We enter mediation. We make a plan for you to pay back Leo's money over time. If you do that, I won't ask for a criminal referral. I won't post about it on Facebook. We keep it sealed. Tessa stared at me. You want me to pay it back? I don't have it. Then you get a job, I said. You sell your car. You figure it out. That is what adults do. And the family? She asked. What do I tell Uncle Jerry? You tell him the truth, I said. Or you tell him nothing. But you stop lying about me. You stop telling people I'm selfish. You stop telling people I am unstable. Tessa laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. So I have to humiliate myself. That is your offer. I have to admit, I am the villain. You have to admit you are human, I said, and that you made a mistake. That is the only way this ends without a judge banging a gavel. Tessa looked at me with a mixture of hatred and longing. She wanted the forgiveness, but she couldn't stomach the accountability. The price of repair was her pride, and her pride was the only currency she had left. You think you are so much better than me, she spat, stepping back from the door. You always have. I don't think I am better, I said. I just think I am done paying for your life. She turned and walked back to her car. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just got in, slammed the door, and reversed out of the driveway, clipping the curb as she went. I closed the door and locked it. I slid the deadbolt home. I went back to the kitchen and looked at the pile of evidence. I hadn't won. She hadn't surrendered. But I had offered the ramp. I had offered the grace. The fact that she refused to take it was her choice, not mine. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. I checked on Leo. He was sleeping diagonally across the bed, one foot sticking out from under the duvet. I sat on the edge of his bed and smoothed his hair. Tomorrow, in a courtroom with fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. My family was going to crack in half. Uncle Jerry would probably stop talking to me. Aunt Carol would cry. Tessa would probably scream. It was going to be ugly. It was going to be painful. But as I looked at my son, I knew I could live with it. He deserved a mother who protected his future. He deserved a mother who stood up to bullies, even when the bully had the same last name. He deserved a mother who didn't accept humiliation as the price of admission to the family. I lay down in my own bed and stared at the dark ceiling. I am not selfish, I whispered to the empty room. I am just awake, and for the first time in 2 years, I closed my eyes and slept without dreaming of cake. The Briar Hollow District Probate Court was not a place of mahogany and marble. It was a place of beige drywall, scuffed linoleum, and the low buzzing hum of fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly green. There was no dramatic gallery, no jury box, and no grand entrance. It was a room designed for the administration of death and debt, and its aggressive ordinariness made the knot in my stomach tighten until I could barely breathe. This was real life. It wasn't a movie where the villain twirls a mustache and the hero delivers a monologue. It was a room full of plastic chairs and tired clerks, where the fate of my family's history was going to be decided by a judge who looked like he wanted a sandwich. I sat next to Mara Klein at a laminate table. My hands were folded in my lap, gripping my knuckles so hard they turned white. Tessa arrived 5 minutes before the session began. She walked in with a new attorney, a man I didn't recognize who wore a suit that was slightly too shiny. She was carrying a stack of documents 3 inches thick. Clutching them to her chest like a shield, she looked impeccable. She wore a modest black dress, her hair pulled back in a severe, grieving bun. She looked like the picture of the dutiful, wounded daughter. She didn't look at me. She sat at the other table, arranging her papers with trembling hands. I saw her glance at the gallery behind us, where Uncle Jerry and Aunt Carol sat. She offered them a brave, watery smile. Uncle Jerry nodded back, looking pained. Aunt Carol wiped her eyes. Tessa had already won the room. She had the optics. She was the one who cried. I was the one with the sharp blazer and the forensic accountant's mindset. All rise, the bailiff droned. Judge Holloway entered. He was a man in his 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose and an expression of permanent fatigue. He sat down, shuffled a file, and looked over his spectacles. "Estate of Eleanor Bryant," he said. "Petition for supplemental accounting. Let us proceed." Tessa's lawyer stood up. He had a booming voice that felt too big for the small room. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here today because the petitioner, Lillian Bryant, is unable to accept the reality of her mother's modest estate. My client, Tessa Bryant, has dutifully administered these assets with love and transparency. The allegations of impropriety are nothing more than a sibling vendetta, fueled by grief and greed. We have brought documentation to show that every cent was spent on the decedent's care and final expenses." Tessa dabbed her eyes with a tissue. It was a perfect performance. Judge Holloway didn't look up from the file. "Thank you, Counselor. Save the opening statements for a jury trial. This is an administrative hearing. I want to look at the numbers." He turned to Mara. "Ms. Klein, you allege undisclosed assets?" Mara stood up. She was calm, precise, and terrifyingly dull. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "We have evidence of a specific account at Briar Hollow Credit Union, ending in 8831, which was omitted from the voluntary administration statement filed by Miss Tessa Bryant. We also have evidence that this account carried a payable on death designation for the petitioner's minor son, which was altered." Tessa's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. That is speculation." "It is not speculation," Mara said, sliding a document across the bench. "It is Exhibit A, a letter from the decedent, notarized 6 months prior to death, explicitly stating the intent for this account. And Exhibit B, a beneficiary change request form submitted to the bank 3 days after the death, with a signature that does not match the decedent's identification." The judge picked up the papers. The room went silent. The only sound was the rustle of paper as he flipped back and forth. Tessa shifted in her seat. She whispered something to her lawyer, who patted her arm. "Ms. Bryant," the judge said, looking directly at Tessa, "did you submit a request to change the beneficiary on this account?" Tessa stood up slowly. Her voice was small, breathless. "Your Honor, there was a lot of paperwork. Mom was so disorganized at the end. I was just trying to make sure her wishes were followed. She told me she wanted the money to go to the funeral." "That is not the question," the judge said. "Did you sign her name to a form dated 2 weeks before she died?" "I was helping her," Tessa stammered. "She couldn't hold the pen very well. She asked me to handle it." "Helping her sign is one thing," the judge said, his voice flat. "Signing for her and then backdating the document is another. And why was this account not listed on the inventory you filed with this court?" "Because it was empty," Tessa cried, her composure cracking. "I used it for the funeral. It shouldn't count if it was used for her expenses." "If it had a beneficiary," the judge said, "it wasn't yours to use. It belonged to the beneficiary the moment she died." Tessa looked at the gallery. She looked at Uncle Jerry, begging for support. Uncle Jerry was staring at his shoes. "Your Honor," Mara said, "regarding the claim that the funds were used for funeral expenses, we would like to submit Exhibit C." She handed the judge the 2 invoices, the one Tessa filed, and the real one from Everbrook Memorial. The document filed by the administrator lists expenses totaling $8,000, Mara said. The actual invoice from the provider is for $4,000. The difference matches exactly the amount withdrawn from the credit union account. The judge looked at the 2 papers. He took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is an altered document," the judge said. He wasn't asking. He was stating. "It is an administrative fee," Tessa blurted out. "For my time, for the gas. I drove her everywhere. I took care of her." "Ms. Bryant," the judge said, his voice dropping an octave. "You cannot charge an administrative fee to an estate by altering a third-party invoice. That is fraud upon the court." The word fraud hung in the air like smoke. Tessa's lawyer looked at the papers, then at Tessa. He closed his folder. He knew. "I didn't steal it," Tessa screamed, and suddenly the quiet, grieving daughter was gone. The real Tessa, the frantic, cornered Tessa, was in the room. I deserved it. She was my mother, too. Lillian didn't do anything. Lillian just wrote checks. I was the one who held her hand. Why does Lillian get the money? Why does Lillian always get everything? Sit down, Ms. Bryant, the judge ordered. It isn't fair, Tessa sobbed, collapsing into her chair. It isn't fair. The judge looked at her for a long moment. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. This court is not a place to adjudicate fairness between siblings, he said. It is a place to adjudicate the law, and the law is clear. He banged his gavel. It was a dull thud. The court finds sufficient cause to order a formal accounting of the estate of Eleanor Bryant. The voluntary administration is revoked. Ms. Tessa Bryant is removed as administrator immediately. An independent administrator will be appointed to audit all transactions for the 3 years prior to death. Furthermore, I am flagging the documents regarding the beneficiary change and the invoice for review by the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal liability. Tessa gasped, a sound like a balloon popping. We are adjourned, the judge said. He stood up and walked out. It was over. In 20 minutes. My sister's entire narrative had been dismantled by 3 pieces of paper. The hallway outside the courtroom was narrow and smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I walked out with Mara, my legs feeling like jelly. You did good, Mara said quietly. The independent administrator will find the rest. She can't hide anything now. She's going to be prosecuted? I asked. The judge flagged it, Mara said. It is up to the DA, but given the forgery, it is likely. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. Tessa came out a moment later. Her lawyer was talking to her in a low, urgent voice, but she wasn't listening. She saw me. She pushed past her lawyer and marched up to me. Her face was streaked with mascara. Her eyes were wild. Are you happy? She hissed. Are you happy now? You just destroyed my life over $4,000. I didn't destroy anything, Tessa, I said. You did. You always get picked, she whispered, her voice trembling with a hate so pure it felt like heat. You always have. Mom picked you to be the smart one. Dad picked you to be the strong one. Even when I tried to make them hate you, they still asked what you wanted. The line landed like a punch to the gut. Even when I tried to make them hate you, they still asked what you wanted. She wasn't talking about the court. She was talking about the family. She was talking about the funeral, the birthday party, the years of whisper campaigns. She had tried to poison the water, not just to hide the money, but to devalue my stock. She wanted them to look at me with disgust so that she could finally feel like the favorite. It wasn't about the money, I said, realizing it for the first time. It was about control. You wanted to control the story. I wanted to be the one who mattered, she cried. Just once. I wanted to be the one who saved the day. But you couldn't let me have it. You had to come in with your receipts and your lawyer and prove that I was just a screw-up. You forged Mom's signature. Tessa, I said. That isn't saving the day. That is stealing. She would have wanted me to have it, Tessa insisted, clutching her chest. She loved me. She did love you, I said. She loved you so much she paid your debts for 20 years. But she didn't trust you. And you just proved her right. Tessa stared at me. Her lip quivered. I hate you, she whispered. I hope you die alone in that big house. I looked at my sister. I saw the fear behind the rage. I saw the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee, waiting for me to bring the Band-Aids. But I wasn't the Band-Aid keeper anymore. I didn't win, Tessa, I said, my voice steady. I survived what you kept doing. I survived your lies. I survived your theft. And I am going to survive your hate. I stepped away from the wall. I am not going to call you names, I said. I am not going to insult Mom. And I am not going to pretend that we can love each other without accountability. You made this choice. I turned and walked away. I heard her sobbing behind me, a raw, ugly sound that echoed off the linoleum, but I didn't turn back. In the parking lot, The family was waiting. Uncle Jerry and Aunt Carol were standing by their car. They looked shell-shocked. They had heard the judge. They had seen the invoices. They couldn't pretend anymore that this was just Lillian being mean. I walked toward my car. I didn't want to talk to them. But Cousin Sarah intercepted me. She looked pale. "Lillian," she said. I stopped. "Hi, Sarah?" She struggled with the words. "I didn't know. About the invoice. The whiteout. God. Lillian. That is sick." "Yes," I said. "I am sorry," she said, her eyes filling with tears. I believed her. She was so convincing. "She said you were trying to bankrupt the estate. I should have asked you. I am so sorry I believed the selfish like your mom thing." "Thank you," I said. It wasn't a magic eraser. It didn't fix the months of isolation, but it was a start. I looked over at Uncle Jerry. He saw me. He hesitated. Then, he opened his car door and got in. He didn't wave. He didn't come over. He couldn't face me. He had spent 2 years defending a thief because it was easier than confronting the tragedy of his sister's failed parenting. He felt foolish, and in my family, shame was a wall that never came down. I realized then that the family wouldn't unify. There would be no group hug. Some would apologize. Some would hide. Some would blame me for exposing the rot. Real consequences don't wrap neatly. They leave shrapnel. I got in my car and drove away. When I got home, the house was quiet. I picked Leo up from school an hour later. He climbed into the car, his backpack heavy with library books. "Did you go to the judge place?" he asked, buckling his seatbelt. "I did," I said. "Did you win?" he asked. I looked at him in the rearview mirror. His eyes were bright and innocent. He didn't know about bank fraud or emotional abuse. "It wasn't a game, buddy," I said. "So nobody really won, but the judge made sure that the truth is safe." "Is Aunt Tessa still mad?" he asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "She is still mad, and she is going to be in a timeout for a very long time. Sometimes grown-ups argue about fairness. Leo, but I need you to know something." "What?" "You are safe," I said, "and you are loved, and nobody is ever going to take what belongs to you as long as I am here." "Okay," he said, opening a bag of goldfish crackers. "Can we get pizza?" "Yes," I said, smiling through the ache in my chest. "We can get pizza." That night, after Leo fell asleep, I sat on the couch and scrolled through the photos on my phone. I found the pictures from the birthday party, the ones taken right before the explosion. There was Leo, smiling in front of the cake. There was the blue frosting. There was the knife in my hand. And there, in the background, blurred but visible, was Tessa. Her face was twisted in a sneer, her eyes locked on me with a predatory focus. My thumb hovered over the delete button. It was a tainted memory. I could erase it. I could crop her out. But I didn't. I kept the photo. Tessa had tried to rewrite reality. She had tried to make me the villain of that day. If I deleted the photo, I was participating in the erasure. I was hiding the evidence. I left it there. It was proof. Proof that I was happy. Proof that I was serving my son. And proof that her hatred existed long before I cut the first slice. 3 days later, the letter came. It wasn't from Tessa. It was from the Briar Hollow Credit Union. "Dear Ms. Bryant, in accordance with the court order received from the District Probate Court, our fraud department has opened a formal investigation into the transaction history of account 8831. We will be cooperating fully with the appointed administrator to recover any funds disbursed under fraudulent pretenses." It was the machinery starting to move. It was slow, it was bureaucratic, but it was unstoppable. Tessa would have to answer questions. She would have to produce bank statements. She would have to explain where the $4,000 went, and when she couldn't, the system would extract it from her. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity. I put the letter in the folder marked Resolved. Then, my phone buzzed. A text message. "Tessa." My heart did that traitorous little skip. The old reflex of hope. Maybe she was apologizing. Maybe she was asking for help. I opened it. I hope your son never looks at you the way Mom looked at you. I stared at the screen. It was ambiguous. Was she saying Mom looked at me with love? With disappointment? With fear? It was designed to haunt me. It was a riddle meant to make me doubt my own memory of my mother. It was a hook, baited with insecurity, dangling in the dark water, waiting for me to bite. What do you mean? That was the response she wanted. She wanted me to engage. She wanted one last fight. I felt the urge to type. I felt the urge to defend Mom, to defend myself. But then I looked at the folder on the counter. The folder with the court order. The folder with the truth. I didn't need to ask her what she meant. I knew how Mom looked at me. She looked at me like I was the one who could do the math. I didn't type a response. I didn't block her. I just put the phone down. I walked into the kitchen and started making dinner. The house was warm. My son was laughing in the other room. The debt was paid. The hook drifted in the water, untouched, until it finally sank to the bottom. Thank you for listening to At My Son's Birthday. My sister called me selfish like your mom. For cutting the cake. This story was a journey through the complexities of family betrayal, the weight of false narratives, and the quiet power of keeping receipts. I would love to hear your thoughts on Lillian's decision. Did she do the right thing by taking her sister to court? Or should family matters stay out of the legal system? And I am curious, where are you listening from today? Please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of dramatic justice and family secrets, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Your support helps me continue to bring these realistic, emotional narratives to life. Until next time, remember, the truth doesn't always win immediately, but it always keeps the score. Thank you for listening.